Nicolás Maduro spent more than a decade presenting himself as an indestructible man, the successor to a charismatic leader, the president who survived sanctions, protests, economic crises, and international isolation. He used to say that Venezuela was protected, that his government was solid, and that his power was unshakable. In the early hours of January 3, 2026, he was sleeping in an underground bunker inside the country's largest military complex, surrounded by layers of security, special forces, and state-of-the-art defense systems. But at that very instant, Venezuela's airspace no longer existed. Without explosions, without alarms, without visible combat, the radar systems were blinded, communications were cut. The country lost the ability to see even before realizing it was under attack. Minutes later, helicopters emerged from the darkness. Soldiers descended in silence. The perimeter fell. The bunker was breached. And the man who claimed to be invincible was found in his pajamas. Operation Absolute Resolve was not the beginning of the story. It was the end. Because before being captured, Nicolás Maduro was a driver, a union leader, a politician, the heir to power, an ordinary man who reached the top. And this video is about how he got there and how in a single night it all ended. Caracas, November 23, 1962. Nicolás Maduro Moros is born into a working-class family in the neighborhood of El Valle, on the western outskirts of Caracas. His father, Nicolás Maduro Garcia, is a union leader and leftist militant. He dies in a car accident in 1989. The boy grows up on Calle 14, a street in a working-class neighborhood. He is the only man among 4 siblings. Politics enters his life early. At the José Avalos High School, he becomes president of the student union, but never graduates. At age 24 in 1986, Maduro travels to Cuba. He spends a year at the Julio Antonio Mella National Cadre School, a political training center of the Communist Youth Union. According to researcher Carlos Peñalosa Zambrano, he is instructed by Pedro Miret Prieto, a member of the Cuban Politburo close to Fidel Castro. The training in Havana defines his ideological trajectory. Back in Caracas, he works as a bus driver for the capital's metro. An imposing figure, 1.90 tall, thick mustache, fan of John Lennon. Underestimating him as just a driver will be the fatal error of the Venezuelan opposition for decades. In the transportation system, Maduro found Citrameca, the Union of Caracas Metro Workers, in 1991, an unofficial union in a company that prohibits unions. It is there, in garage negotiations and worker assemblies, that he learns the art of coercion, grassroots organization, and political survival. A 2006 telegram from the United States Embassy in Caracas, released by WikiLeaks, notes that Maduro was a member of the National Committee of the Socialist League, a Marxist-Leninist party. The same document mentions that he allegedly refused a contract from a Major League Baseball scout. A young man passionate about baseball who was divided between his passion and politics. He set aside other paths and chose politics, a decision that, years later, would take him much further than anyone could imagine. February 4, 1992. Lieutenant Colonel Hugo Chávez leads a failed military coup against President Carlos Andrés Pérez. Tanks in the streets, shootouts. The coup fails in less than 24 hours. Chávez is arrested, but his appearance on television, taking responsibility with the phrase "por ahora," for now, transforms him into a popular hero. Millions of Venezuelans, frustrated with corruption, see in him a hope. Maduro enters the scene. Along with a young lawyer named Celia Flores, he becomes the vital link between the imprisoned commander and the movement in the streets. Flores defends Chávez in prison. Maduro organizes campaigns for his release. It is during this time that Maduro and Celia begin a relationship that will last for decades. In 1994, President Rafael Caldera grants a pardon to Chávez. December 6, 1998. Hugo Chávez is elected president with 56% of the votes. The Bolivarian era begins. Maduro climbs the bureaucratic steps with silent efficiency. In the year 2000, he is elected to the National Assembly. From 2005 to 2006, he presides over the assembly. In 2006, he becomes Minister of Foreign Affairs. During 6 years as chancellor, he builds the alliances that will sustain the regime. Deep ties with Cuba, financial roots with Iran, technological dependence on China, military shield from Russia. While Chávez screams and polarizes on the global stage, Maduro is the gray man, the operator behind the scenes. A perfect yes, sir. Chávez needs absolute loyalty, not competing intellectual brilliance. Maduro delivers exactly that. October 11, 2012, Hugo Chávez wins the election for a fourth term. But something is wrong. Rumors about his health are increasingly serious. 4 days later, Chávez appoints Maduro as vice president. The appointment surprises many. Diosdado Cabello, a former vice president with deep ties to the armed forces, was considered the natural heir. But Maduro's relationship with Cuban officials, deeply involved in advising Chávez, cements the choice. December 8, 2012. Hugo Chávez is dying of cancer. On national television, before leaving for another surgery in Cuba, he makes the announcement that defines the future of Venezuela.
Firme, plena como la luna llena, irrevocable, absoluta, total. Ustedes elijan a Nicolás Maduro como presidente de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela. Yo se los pido desde mi corazón.
March 5, 2013. Hugo Rafael Chávez Frías dies at age 58. Maduro announces the death on national television, with tears in his eyes. Venezuela mourns. Millions take to the streets. April 14, 2013. Special election. Maduro faces Henrique Capriles. Result: Maduro wins with 50.62% against 49.12%, a margin of only 1.5%. Capriles demands a recount. He alleges fraud. The opposition does not recognize the result. Maduro ignores it. He is sworn in on April 19th. The bus driver is now president of Venezuela. From 2014 to 2019, Maduro inherits a Venezuela in crisis. Inflation is at 56%, shelves are emptying. Oil dependency, 98% of exports, is a ticking time bomb. And then the price of oil plummets. From $100 per barrel in 2014 to $30 in 2016. Venezuela enters freefall. PDVSA, the state oil company, was transformed during the Chávez years. Experienced technicians were replaced by political allies. Production fell from 3 million barrels per day to 2.3 million. Without revenue and without technical capacity, the collapse accelerates. GDP contracts 5.7% in 2015, then 18.6% in 2016. The government stops releasing figures. The economy shrinks 61% in per capita terms by the end of the decade. It is the greatest economic crisis in Venezuelan history, the greatest drop in standard of living outside of war in modern history. Hyperinflation devours everything. In 2018, it exceeds 130,000% per year. The currency becomes worthless paper. Venezuelans queue at dawn for food. They scavenge through trash. They lose an average of 11 kilograms in 2017, the Maduro diet. Hospitals collapse. Basic medicines are missing. Children die of malnutrition. The health system crumbles. In 2019, blackouts leave millions without power for days. Violence explodes. Caracas becomes one of the most dangerous cities in the world. Meanwhile, Maduro represses any opposition. In 2014, student protests are crushed. 43 dead, thousands arrested. Leopoldo López is incarcerated. By 2018, 115 media outlets are closed. Democracy dies silently, decree after decree. From 2015 to 2025. First, there are hundreds, then thousands, then millions. Venezuelans flee on foot across the borders. They walk for days through Colombia, Brazil, Peru, Ecuador. They carry children on their backs. They sleep in tents. They beg for food. It is the largest forced displacement in the history of Latin America. Larger than any civil war, larger than any natural disaster. Colombia receives 2.8 million. Peru, Ecuador, Chile, and Brazil absorb millions more. Some reach the United States after journeys lasting months. In 2024, more than 30,000 children crossed the deadly Darien Gap in Panama. By May 2025, more than 7.7 million Venezuelans will have left the country, almost 25% of the population. 1 in every 4 Venezuelans lives in exile. The UN and the OAS classify the exodus as the largest displacement crisis in the Western Hemisphere in the last 50 years. And Maduro? He denies everything. He denies the humanitarian crisis. He denies the hunger. He denies the deaths. He accuses the international media of fabricating news. In a moment of grotesque disconnection from reality, while his people scavenged through trash for food, he appeared on television calmly eating an empanada during a live speech. While the legitimate economy collapses, a parallel economy flourishes in the shadows. In 2005, Venezuela expels the DEA, accusing it of espionage. The absence of American oversight transforms the country into a privileged corridor for cocaine trafficking. Connections between Venezuelan authorities and cartels consolidate into a network known as the Cartel de los Soles, the Cartel of the Suns. The name refers to the sun insignias worn by Venezuelan generals. Scandals accumulate. In 2013, French police seized 1.3 tons of cocaine in 31 suitcases on an Air France flight coming from Caracas. 28 arrested, including a lieutenant colonel. In 2015, Limzy Salazar, Chávez's former head of security, flees to the United States and accuses Diosdado Cabello of leading the cartel. In 2016, American prosecutors indict Nestor Reverol, former anti-drug chief, for trafficking. The following day, Maduro appoints him Minister of the Interior. The pattern: the more serious the accusation, the higher the promotion. March 26, 2020. The United States Department of Justice indicts Maduro and 14 officials for narco-terrorism and cocaine trafficking. Prosecutor Jeffrey Berman declares, Maduro deliberately used cocaine as a weapon. A $15 million reward is offered for his arrest, the largest ever placed on a sitting head of state. Maduro calls the accusations fabricated and imperialist aggression. July 28, 2024. Venezuela goes to the polls. Maria Corina Machado, the opposition leader, won the 2023 primaries with 93% of the vote, but the regime prohibits her from running. Edmundo González Urrutia, a 74-year-old diplomat, becomes the candidate for the unified opposition. Hundreds of thousands of volunteers are trained as electoral observers. Despite the risk of imprisonment and torture, they monitor the polling stations. Polls show González with a lead of up to 47 points. The results arrive in the early hours of July 29th. The National Electoral Council announces Maduro wins with 51.2% against 44.2%. There is no breakdown by station, no documentation. The CNE website goes offline. The fraud is blatant. Mathematician Terence Tao, a Fields medalist, notes that the results have strangely round percentages. The signature of manipulation. The opposition reveals its weapon. Volunteers managed to obtain copies of 85% of the tally sheets. The real numbers: González with 67%, Maduro with 30%. Political scientist Stephen Levitsky classifies the election as one of the most flagrant frauds in the modern history of Latin America. Protests explode. More than 2,000 arrested, at least 25 dead. January 10th, 2025. Ignoring everything, Maduro is sworn in for a third term. I was not made president by the United States government, he declares. I come from the people. October 2025. The Nobel Peace Prize is awarded to Maria Corina Machado for her struggle to achieve a peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy. It is a devastating blow for Maduro. The woman he persecutes and calls a fascist is now globally recognized as a champion of peace. Machado escapes from Venezuela secretly. Disguised with a wig, she travels by wooden boat to Curaçao. She fractures a vertebra during the crossing. She flies to Oslo. She dedicates the prize to Donald Trump. Trump returns to the White House with an aggressive policy toward Venezuela. In October, he authorizes CIA operations inside the country. The agency infiltrates sources into the heart of the regime. In November, Trump calls Maduro. An ultimatum: it would be in his best interest to resign and leave the country. Maduro refuses. The reward for his capture is doubled to $50 million, the highest in American history for a head of state. The Navy builds up firepower in the Caribbean. The aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford is positioned in international waters. December 30th, 2025. A CIA drone fires Hellfire missiles at a port facility in Venezuelan territory. First recognized attack on sovereign soil. Maduro does not respond. He tries to ignore it, fearing he will provide a pretext for invasion. Washington interprets the passivity as terminal weakness. Intelligence confirms military loyalty is fractured. Russian defense systems are vulnerable. At Mar-a-Lago, Trump gives the final order: good luck and go with God. January 3rd, 2026, 2 o'clock in the morning, Venezuelan airspace. At the air defense radar consoles, Russian technicians supervise Venezuelan officers. S-300 VM systems scan the horizon. The screens show a clear sky. It is a digital illusion. At 30,000 feet, U.S. Navy EA-18G Growler aircraft saturate the electromagnetic spectrum. They do not destroy the radars. They lobotomize them. Sensors blinded. Communications cut. Venezuela's sovereign airspace ceases to exist. At 2:01 a.m., the generals on the ground still do not know. F-35 and F-22 fighters ensure total air superiority without firing a single missile. The Venezuelan Air Force never takes off. Operation Absolute Resolve does not begin with a massive explosion. It begins with fabricated silence and surgical precision. 2:14 a.m. Fuerte Tuna Military Complex. Fuerte Tuna is a city within the city. 400 hectares. Headquarters of the armed forces and residence of Nicolás Maduro. The president sleeps in an underground bunker. Layers of security protect him. Presidential Guard, military counterintelligence, and an inner ring of Cuban special forces. They monitor the streets. They do not monitor the ceiling. The sound arrives first, a low hum of rotors. Modified MH-60M Black Hawk helicopters from the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment emerge. From the darkness, the legendary Night Stalkers, flying low, masked by urban noise. The helicopters land, the doors open. Delta Force operators emerge. Night vision goggles, HK-416 rifles with suppressors, explosive charges. There is no negotiation. There is no ultimatum. The action is kinetic, brutal, and surgical. The outer perimeter is breached in 3 minutes. Venezuelan guards, trained to repress civilians, face the elite of global special operations, but the Cuban Guard is different. 32 members of the Special Forces form the last line of defense. Veterans ideologically committed. The gunfire is intense, confined to the quarters. Flashbangs detonate. Doors are breached with explosives. Smoke fills the hallways. In minutes, it is over. All 32 Cubans are dead. There are no American casualties. The master bedroom. The armored door is breached. Maduro is found in sleepwear. He tries to run to his safe room, a steel-reinforced room. He doesn't make it in time. He is dragged into custody. Beside him is Celia Flores. There are no anti-imperialist speeches, no invocations of Bolivar. The reality of power is reduced to the physics of the moment. Polymer handcuffs, blinding tactical lights, commands in English. The propaganda, super mustache, the superhero who destroyed American. Drones with his hands is now a 63-year-old man in pajamas, handcuffed on the floor. 2:48 a.m., takeoff. The assault force takes flight. Fuerte Tuna burns in localized flames. Drones destroyed vehicles and communications, but the city's infrastructure remains intact. On board the aircraft, noise-canceling headphones, a gray Nike sweatshirt. A photo will leak hours later, the dictator sitting on the floor of a U.S. military aircraft. The image of absolute defeat. Mar-a-Lago, same night. Trump watches in real time. If you had seen it, I watched it literally like a television show. He says later, the speed, the violence, it was incredible. January 3rd, 2026, late afternoon, Stewart Air National Guard Base, New York. A Department of Justice aircraft lands at the Stewart Air National Guard Base, 100 kilometers from Manhattan. Nicolás Maduro descends the stairs. Beside him is Terry Cole, administrator of the DEA, the same agency that Maduro expelled from Venezuela in 2005. It is the photo that prosecutors waited years for. The dictator accused of using cocaine as a weapon, now in the custody of the American Anti-Drug Agency. Maduro is transferred to Manhattan. From there, he is taken to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. January 5th, 2026, Manhattan Federal Court. Security is the most intense ever seen at the federal court. Maduro and Celia Flores appear before Judge Alvin Hellerstein. The charges are read: narco-terrorism conspiracy, minimum sentence of 20 years. Conspiracy to import cocaine, possession of machine guns and destructive devices in connection with trafficking. Maduro pleads not guilty. He accuses the American government of kidnapping. He says he is a decent man. He states that he considers himself a prisoner of war, captured in his own home. Celia Flores also pleads not guilty. Attorney General Pam Bondi issues a statement. Maduro is one of the most notorious drug traffickers in the world. Under the leadership of President Trump, he will not escape justice. The dictator who ruled Venezuela for nearly 13 years is now a common defendant in the American judicial system. The king is naked. Caracas, January 2026. Venezuela wakes up in an unrecognizable world. On the morning of January 3rd, Caracas does not explode in celebration. The streets are deserted. The silence is tense. The fear of looting and retaliation keeps the population locked away. The Supreme Court appoints Delcy Rodriguez as interim president. She denounces the kidnapping, but her rhetoric is restrained. She knows the F-35s are minutes away from Caracas. Diosdado Cabello is still free. He appears calling for Bolivarian fury. But without Maduro and with $25 million on his head, his words echo in a vacuum. Maria Corina Machado emerges. From hiding, she demands that Edmundo Gonzalez be recognized as the legitimate president, but Trump prefers to work with the remaining structure. The CIA director lands in Caracas for meetings with Rodriguez. Democratic transition can wait. Oil cannot. Nicolás Maduro Moros sleeps today in a cell in Brooklyn. He left behind a destroyed nation. The regime he built was not overthrown by its people. It was decapitated by foreign force in less than an hour. History will judge whether it was justice or imperialism.